My wife walked out on me for my boss after they concocted false sexual harassment claims to get me fired. Then, they swindled my parents out of $75,000 with a bogus business venture. But I fought back, collected undeniable proof, and had them both arrested. I'm 34, a man, and I desperately need to share this because even after 6 months, I still can't fully grasp how my entire world flipped overnight. Only now am I beginning to comprehend the intricate web of their scheme. Let me give you some context. I spent 8 years at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm, climbing from junior associate to senior accountant. My wife, Emma, 32, and I had been married 6 years. 3 years ago, we bought a nice house, largely thanks to my parents who contributed $20,000 for the down payment. Emma, 32, worked part-time at a local salon, but constantly griped about her income. My boss, Rick, 38, took over as department head 2 years prior. Rick was the type who played everyone's pal, yet you always sensed a shrewd calculation beneath the surface. He'd casually drop personal tidbits about colleagues during meetings, seemingly privy to everyone's private affairs. Emma first crossed paths with Rick at our company Christmas party last year, and they instantly connected over a shared love for some reality TV show. The first hints of trouble surfaced roughly 4 months before my life imploded. Emma's routine began shifting. She started waking an hour earlier for elaborate makeup, a stark contrast to her usual mascara and go. When I inquired, she claimed she wanted a more professional look for the salon. She also suddenly took up post-work gym sessions, something entirely new for her, citing a desire to get in shape for summer. Then came the late-night phone calls. Emma would receive texts and vanish outside to answer, explaining it was her sister in California grappling with relationship issues. Given the time difference to Ohio, the excuse felt plausible. I trusted her implicitly, so I didn't dwell on it. Roughly 2 months before the catastrophe, Emma began discussing her dream of starting a downtown clothing boutique. She had seemingly done all the legwork, location scouting, supplier research, business licenses, even detailed mock-ups on her laptop. The hurdle? Startup capital. She needed around $50,000 to launch properly, and our joint savings only held $15,000. Emma persistently suggested my parents, who'd helped with our house, might want to invest. She meticulously crafted a presentation, highlighting immense profit potential and positioning it as a sound retirement investment for them. My parents, Tom, 61, and Linda, 58, were lifelong savers. Dad, a career construction worker, and Mom, a school district secretary, meticulously hoarded every penny for their golden years. What struck me as odd was Emma's intimate knowledge of their finances. She knew their retirement funds were in CDs, their interest earnings, even when Dad's pension would activate. At the time, I assumed I'd mentioned these details over the years. But in hindsight, I can't recall ever sharing such specific information. 3 weeks before my life imploded, Emma orchestrated a dinner at our house for my parents. She cooked Dad's favorite pot roast and uncorked a pricey wine. Post-dinner, she launched into her business pitch, complete with projected profit charts, photos of the proposed location, and glowing testimonials from other boutique owners she supposedly consulted. My parents appeared intrigued but requested time to consider. Emma, though visibly disappointed, feigned understanding. Over the following fortnight, she subtly nudged the topic into conversations during calls or visits, mentioning perfect dress suppliers or how another downtown space just got snatched up, subtly implying the fleeting nature of her opportunity. Then came the day that splintered my reality. At 7 a.m., an urgent text from HR requested my early presence for an important meeting. I imagined it was the promotion Rick had hinted at weeks earlier, a new corporate division opening. That morning, Emma was already deep in her makeup. Ritual. I kissed her goodbye, mentioned the meeting. She barely glanced up from her phone, a distracted nod her only reply. I assumed she was consumed by her business plans. By 8 a.m., I was in the conference room. HR, Rick, and another department head I barely knew sat grim-faced, their serious expressions instantly chilling me. The HR manager, Janet, 45, opened a folder reciting what sounded like a pre-written indictment. She announced multiple complaints had been lodged against me for inappropriate behavior towards female colleagues, suggestive comments, illicit messages, creating a hostile environment. I was utterly dumbfounded. I demanded specifics, names of accusers. Janet cited protection for the complainants, detailing alleged incidents like comments on appearances, intrusive personal questions, and out-of-hours texts. It was all baseless. I rarely spoke to female co-workers beyond professional discourse. Personal texts were unthinkable. I asked for evidence, for a chance to confront my accusers. Rick, who'd remained silent, finally spoke. He claimed the company took such allegations seriously and had decided to terminate my employment immediately. He couldn't meet my gaze. Security would escort me out, personal effects mailed. I pressed about an appeal, a dispute process. Janet declared the decision final. My last paycheck and Cobra info arriving by mail. My digital access was already severed. A security guard shadowed me to my desk for a coffee mug and a few photos. My colleagues gawked as I walked through the office, some bewildered, others studiously avoiding my eyes. The entire ordeal lasted perhaps 15 minutes. Stunned, I sat in my car, grappling with the recent assault on my career. I repeatedly called Emma, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. Finally, I headed home, needing to figure out my next move. En route, at a red light, I remembered the mortgage payment due. I pulled up my banking app. Our checking account showed a paltry $237. Our savings, zero. I swerved into a parking lot, heart pounding, and called the bank. They confirmed it. $42,000 had been transferred out the previous day. Emma's login credentials and security codes authorized the transfers to an unfamiliar account. I sped home, running lights, cornering dangerously. Emma's car sat in the driveway, unusual for her 5 p.m. workday. I burst inside, finding her in our bedroom, 2 suitcases on the bed, meticulously folding clothes. She looked up, unsurprised by my early return. I demanded to know what was happening and where our money went. She calmly continued packing, declaring she was leaving me. She'd moved our money somewhere safe, she claimed, because she didn't trust me to handle finances responsibly after losing my job. I pointed out I'd been fired just an hour ago. How could she have moved the money yesterday? She finally stopped folding, locking eyes with me. She admitted she'd been planning. This for months, with Rick's help. Rick, she explained, had told her the company was firing me anyway due to several women's complaints. She couldn't be married to someone who couldn't respect women or hold down a job. I pressed for details, for names, for specifics. She dismissed me, saying Rick had told her everything and she was disgusted. The women were too scared to confront me, but had documented everything. Then came the bombshell. Rick had offered her a job at his brother's marketing firm, and they were moving in together. Rick, she declared, was a real man who treated women properly and knew how to build a future. I then asked about the boutique and my parents' money. She simply laughed. My parents, she announced, had already invested their retirement savings in her boutique. They'd transferred $75,000 yesterday after she informed them about my workplace problems. My parents, she added, were ashamed of me, disowned me, and wanted no further contact. I immediately dialed my parents. Dad answered on the second, ring, unleashing a torrent of angry accusations before I could speak. He couldn't believe he'd raised a son who would treat women that way. Emma had called them crying, detailing my behavior at work and her fear of me. They'd given Emma their retirement funds to help her start fresh, feeling responsible for raising me wrong. He declared I was no longer welcome and never to contact them again. Mom got on, sobbing, disappointed and embarrassed to call me her son. Emma, she claimed, had shown them screenshots of my inappropriate messages to co-workers. The evidence was clear, and they supported Emma's decision. I tried to protest my innocence, but Dad snatched the phone and hung up. While I was on the phone, Emma finished packing. She grabbed her 2 suitcases and headed for the door. I followed, asking where she was going. She announced she was moving in with Rick. They'd launch the boutique using my parents' investment. The house was in both our names, but she'd let me keep it as she didn't want anything else from me. Consider it compensation for all the years she wasted being married to me. She loaded her bags into her car and drove away. I stood in the driveway, watching her taillights fade into the distance. Back inside, I called my sister, Ashley, 29, in Denver. She'd already heard from Mom, who had tearfully described my behavior and questioned how they'd missed the signs. I told Ashley everything. It was a setup, a conspiracy by Emma and Rick. Ashley admitted she wanted to believe me, but the evidence, Emma's alleged screenshots, seemed irrefutable to our parents. She promised to try talking to Mom and Dad, but cautioned they were too distraught to listen. Her advice, focus on getting help. Maybe someday we could work things out. That night, I slept on the couch, unable to enter the bedroom, still permeated by Emma's packing. My mind replayed the HR meeting, desperately trying to piece together how they'd manufactured such convincing false evidence. Over the next few days, I made repeated attempts to reach my parents. Dad would immediately hang up at the sound of my voice. Mom would sob, asking why I was putting them through this. They flat out refused to hear my side. I explored legal options, but consultation fees were prohibitive without an income. The lawyer I spoke to warned that employment cases were notoriously difficult and expensive, especially with claims of multiple witnesses. I applied for unemployment, but the company contested it, citing misconduct. The appeals process would drag on for months, and I needed income now. I began applying for new jobs, but the accounting industry is small. Bad news travels fast. Most companies I contacted already knew my situation. Several interviews vanished after they called Morrison and Associates for a reference. 2 weeks after Emma's departure, I stumbled upon her Facebook post announcing the grand opening of her boutique. The photos showed a chic storefront, trendy clothes, and a professional sign. Rick was prominently featured, his arm possessively around Emma's waist. My parents had commented, gushing congratulations, punctuated, with crying, laughing emojis and hearts. Their public support for Emma, while simultaneously refusing to speak to me, felt worse than losing my job. It hit me then. This wasn't just about Emma leaving or my job loss. This was Rick and Emma systematically dismantling my relationships and reputation to be together and siphon my parents' retirement. Every step, meticulously calculated, planned months in advance. That's where I was, trapped in a house that felt like a tomb, piecing together temporary jobs, barely surviving, and utterly cut off from my family. Emma and Rick, meanwhile, were living their best lives, blessed by my parents' money. I clung to the hope of proving their deceit, but where to begin? Rick had covered his tracks masterfully. Emma played her role flawlessly. My parents had chosen their lies over my truth, and I feared nothing could change that. Update 1. I never anticipated such an outpouring of attention, but I'm incredibly grateful for all the advice and support. So much has transpired since my initial post, and I wanted to update you all because some of your suggestions actually bore fruit. First, many of you urged me to meticulously document everything and search for evidence of the fraud. I began poring over old bank statements, emails, and text messages, painstakingly constructing a timeline. What I unearthed was revealing. Emma had accessed our joint account far more frequently in the months leading up to her departure. Small transfers, $50 here, $100 there, were diverted to an unfamiliar account. Compiling them, I found she'd siphoned over $3,000 in small increments during the 4 months preceding the massive transfer. I also discovered photos of our mail, including bank statements and my parents' investment documents, saved in her cloud storage, which she'd forgotten to log out of on our shared iPad. But the true breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Remember how several job interviews mysteriously vanished after companies contacted Morrison and Associates for references? One hiring manager, David, 52, from a rival firm, called me back. David found Rick's reference suspicious. Having worked with me on past collaborations, he knew my alleged behavior didn't align with the professional he encountered. Rick, he noted, had been overly eager, volunteering unasked for, damning details. David suggested I contact former co-workers who'd recently left Morrison and Associates, reasoning they might speak freely now. I reached out to Maria, 29, laid off from Morrison and Associates roughly 6 months before my own termination. Maria and I had collaborated on several projects, and she was among the female colleagues Rick had supposedly claimed I harassed. When I explained the situation, Maria was aghast. She'd never filed a complaint against me and was unaware her name was being used. Rick, she confirmed, had never once questioned her about my behavior. Maria then shared something even more unsettling. Rick had a reputation for meddling in employees' personal lives. She'd heard rumors of him orchestrating the breakup of another office couple just to date the woman. Rick, it seemed, would befriend married women, gradually persuading them their husbands were inadequate, then positioning himself as their rescuer. Maria readily agreed to provide a statement affirming she never complained about me, nor had Rick ever approached her regarding my conduct. She also connected me with 2 other former female colleagues who were also allegedly among the complainants. Both women, Sarah, 26, and Jennifer, 31, independently confirmed they had never filed complaints against me. Sarah was particularly incensed, revealing Rick had explicitly told her I was spreading false rumors about her personal life. Jennifer recounted Rick approaching her 6 months prior, inquiring about my marriage and Emma's happiness. She'd found it odd then, but assumed it was casual conversation. All 3 women agreed to provide written statements, and Jennifer even offered to testify if I pursued legal action. Armed with this burgeoning evidence, I reconnected with the employment lawyer. With witness statements directly refuting the company's claims, he concluded I had a far stronger case for wrongful termination. He agreed to take the case on a contingency basis, meaning I'd pay nothing unless we won. The lawyer promptly sent a formal demand letter to Morrison and Associates, requesting my personnel file and all documentation related to the complaints. They had 30 days to respond. Meanwhile, I'd been discreetly observing Emma's boutique. Her social media portrayed a booming grand opening, but I noted Rick's continued employment at Morrison and Associates on LinkedIn, despite his constant presence in the boutique photos. I drove by the store several times, noticing Rick's car parked there during normal work hours. It appeared he was managing the boutique while still drawing a salary from his firm. I began documenting this, photographing his car at the boutique during his supposed work hours. I also observed Emma's posts about business meetings and supplier visits aligning precisely with Rick's regular work schedule. Then, an unexpected call from Ashley in Denver. She'd been pondering our conversation and decided to do her own reconnaissance. She created a fake social media account and began following Emma's boutique page. Ashley noticed Emma's posts contained business decisions and terminology that seemed too sophisticated for someone with no prior experience. Ashley, with her MBA, recognized complex strategies usually requiring professional consulting. Crucially, Ashley spotted Rick in the background of some of Emma's posts, clearly visible during his regular work hours. She screenshotted these, timestamps proving his presence during office hours. But Ashley's most damning find was a post where Emma mentioned meeting investors and business advisors. In the background of one photo, Ashley recognized paperwork, resembling my parents' personal financial information. Ashley declared she was starting to believe I was indeed being set up. She offered to help gather more evidence and promised to try speaking with our parents again. 2 days later, Ashley called our parents. She avoided mentioning me directly, instead asking general questions about their investment in Emma's business. Mom, proud, explained Emma's knowledgeable business planning and her impressive references from other successful boutique owners. When Ashley inquired about these references, Mom stated Emma had shown them testimonial letters from other boutique owners who'd used the same business consultant Emma was employing. Mom elaborated that Rick had recommended this consultant who specialized in retail. Ashley instantly grasped the deeper deception. Rick wasn't just helping Emma personally, he was actively involved in defrauding my parents by fabricating business credentials and references. Ashley told me she was now fully convinced I was the victim of an elaborate fraud. She announced she was driving from Denver to help me investigate further and potentially confront our parents with the accumulating evidence. Around this time, I also received a call from David, the suspicious hiring manager. David said he'd been talking to others in our industry and heard similar stories about Rick's questionable references. Rick, it seemed, had a pattern of bad-mouthing former employees beyond standard professional references. David suspected Rick was intentionally sabotaging careers for personal reasons. He offered to make more calls to see if Rick was spreading rumors beyond official channels. Proving Rick was intentionally damaging my reputation would significantly bolster my legal case. 3 days later, David called back with disturbing news. He'd spoken to hiring managers at 4 different companies where I'd applied. All confirmed Rick had called them unsolicited to warn them against hiring me. Rick had told these companies I was under investigation for harassment, unstable after my divorce, and a potential risk to female employees. He'd volunteered this information without prompting, explicitly requesting they not mention his calls to me. This was unequivocally beyond the scope of professional references. Rick was actively campaigning to block my employment throughout the industry. David vowed to document these conversations, providing statements from hiring managers willing to confirm Rick's inappropriate interference with my job search. By this point, I possessed enough evidence to demonstrate Rick and Emma had orchestrated a full-blown conspiracy to destroy my career, steal my parents' retirement savings, and isolate me from my family. The lawyer confirmed we had a robust case for multiple claims, including wrongful termination, defamation, and likely fraud. But I wanted more than a mere legal victory. I wanted my parents to witness the stark truth of Emma and Rick's actions. I wanted Emma's fraudulent business to collapse as utterly as my career had been demolished. And I wanted Rick to face severe consequences for his manipulative theft. Ashley arrived from Denver last weekend, and we spent 2 days meticulously reviewing all the evidence and strategizing our next moves. Ashley planned a meeting with our parents to reveal everything we'd uncovered. We also decided to anonymously tip off Morrison and Associates about Rick's activities during work hours. If Rick was using company time to operate Emma's boutique, that constituted grounds for termination, cutting off a key funding source for their operation. The lawyer expected Morrison and Associates' response regarding my personnel file this week. Once we had it, we'd refine our legal strategy. I never imagined becoming a fraud investigator or legal strategist, yet here I was. The people I trusted, most had systematically destroyed my life for financial and personal gain. Now, I was fighting back with irrefutable evidence and truth, no longer just hoping someone would believe me. I'll update again after we hear from the lawyer and after Ashley speaks with our parents. Things are finally moving in the right direction, but I know Rick and Emma won't surrender easily once they realize I'm fighting back. Update 2. This update will likely be longer as so much has happened, some of it utterly unforeseen. My sincere thanks again to everyone following and offering guidance. First, the legal front. Morrison and Associates responded to our demand letter, though not as anticipated. Rather than my personnel file, their corporate attorney sent a letter, claiming all employment records were confidential, requiring a court order for release. However, this letter made a critical blunder. It explicitly stated my termination was based on documented complaints from 4 specific female employees and asserted the company possessed video evidence of inappropriate behavior. This was striking, as Rick had initially vaguely mentioned multiple women, but refused names or numbers. Now, we had a specific count and a claim of non-existent video. My lawyer immediately filed a motion for discovery, demanding these alleged videos and documented complaints. We also subpoenaed the 4 women named in the corporate response. And here's where it gets truly astonishing. When contacted for depositions, 3 of the women had no idea what the lawyers were referring to. They unequivocally confirmed they had never complained about me, nor had HR ever interviewed them about my behavior. The 4th woman, Patricia, 43, had a different tale. She recounted Rick approaching her approximately 2 months before my termination, asking if she'd ever felt uncomfortable around me. When she said no, Rick suggested she might have been too polite to recognize inappropriate behavior. Patricia, said Rick relentlessly pushed, describing fabricated scenarios and asking if she remembered them differently. Eventually, Patricia admitted she signed some kind of statement just to make Rick stop harassing her. She believed she was signing a general workplace survey, but the document was, in fact, a formal complaint alleging specific harassment incidents. Patricia was horrified upon realizing what she'd unknowingly signed and agreed to testify that Rick had manipulated her into signing a false statement. So much for the 4 documented complaints. We now had irrefutable evidence that Rick had entirely fabricated 3 and manipulated the 4th employee into signing something she didn't comprehend. The claimed video evidence was even simpler to expose. Morrison and Associates only had security cameras in common areas, lobbies, break rooms, not in individual offices or workspaces where the alleged incidents supposedly occurred. When pressed, the company quietly admitted no such videos existed, conceding their initial response had been an error. My lawyer declared we now had a slam-dunk case for wrongful termination and defamation. The company, he asserted, would undoubtedly seek a settlement rather than face a trial with such fabricated evidence and manipulated witnesses. But the truly monumental developments unfolded on the personal front. With my family, Ashley had requested a meeting with our parents to discuss their investment in Emma's boutique. She presented her concerns as an independent professional review, leveraging her MBA to ensure their investment was sound. She deliberately didn't tell them she was working with me. Ashley systematically highlighted multiple red flags, unrealistic, profit projections for a new boutique in our market, inflated startup costs compared to similar businesses, unverifiable supplier relationships, Emma claimed, and, most critically, the business consultant Emma supposedly used simply did not exist. The consultant's business registration, website, and testimonial letters were all fake. Ashley then showed our parents side-by-side comparisons of Emma's business plan and a generic online template. Vast sections of Emma's plan were lifted, verbatim, uncustomized for the local market or actual business conditions. Dad grew defensive, insisting Emma had shown them proof of her research and consultant meetings. Ashley calmly asked to see it. Mom produced a folder of documents Emma had provided. Ashley methodically dissected each one, demonstrating to our parents how it was either fabricated or misleading. Supplier contracts were with companies that didn't deal with retail boutiques. Market research cited statistics from different cities and business types. Financial projections assumed impossible customer traffic for a new downtown store. But the most damning piece was a receipt Emma had provided for consultant fees. Ashley cross-referenced the business name on the receipt. It was a landscaping company in another state. Emma had literally faked a receipt using a random online business name. Ashley said Dad turned stone-faced, utterly silent, as she revealed the fake receipt. Mom dissolved into tears, lamenting how foolish they'd been. Then Ashley unveiled Rick's integral role in creating these fraudulent documents and how he'd leveraged his position at Morrison and Associates to orchestrate the entire situation. Ashley detailed Rick's history of targeting married couples, how he'd systematically isolated Emma from me while presenting himself as her savior. She presented the evidence of Rick sabotaging my job search and manipulating Patricia into signing a false complaint. Ashley recounted our parents sitting in stunned silence for 10 minutes, simply staring at the documents scattered across their kitchen table. Finally, Dad quietly asked if I knew about any of this. Ashley explained I was the one who had uncovered most of the evidence, desperately trying to clear my name and prove Rick and Emma had framed me. Mom then asked why I hadn't told them myself. Ashley calmly reminded them I had tried, but they wouldn't listen and had refused my calls. Ashley said Dad seemed to age a decade in that conversation. He grasped the horrific truth. Not only had they given their retirement money to a fraudster, but they had also abandoned their own son based on malicious lies. The immediate question was the money. Ashley helped them contact their bank to reverse the transfer. But it was too late. The funds were already spent on inventory and lease deposits. Ashley suggested contacting the police to report the fraud, but Dad worried about the publicity and the shame of admitting they'd been swindled. More profoundly, Dad dreaded facing me after their treatment. Ashley said he kept repeating that I would never forgive them. Ashley assured them I wasn't seeking an apology or immediate reconciliation. I simply wanted the truth exposed so I could rebuild my career. She suggested they start by providing written statements detailing how Emma and Rick defrauded them. These statements would bolster my legal case and potentially initiate a criminal fraud case against Emma and Rick. My parents, humbled, agreed to provide statements and testify if necessary. Dad stated it was the least they could do after how they'd treated me. Meanwhile, I had been collaborating with David and other industry contacts, meticulously documenting Rick's interference with my job search. We now possessed statements from 6 different companies confirming Rick had called them to spread rumors about me. One hiring manager, Kevin 48, said Rick's call was so egregious that Kevin had made detailed notes at the time. Rick had claimed I was dangerous and that Emma had fled our house in fear. Kevin found the call so disturbing he considered reporting Rick to his own company's HR. Kevin provided a copy of his contemporaneous notes about Rick's call. All this evidence was culminating into something far larger than just my wrongful termination case. Rick had committed fraud against my parents, defamation against me, and possibly embezzlement from his employer by using work time for personal gain. Emma had committed fraud by fabricating business documents and stealing money under false pretenses. She had also actively participated in the defamation campaign against me. My lawyer was now collaborating with a criminal defense attorney specializing in white-collar crime. They believed we possessed sufficient evidence for the prosecutor to bring criminal charges against both Rick and Emma. But before we could proceed with criminal charges, something utterly unexpected happened that altered everything. Ashley, still monitoring Emma's social media and business accounts to track our parents' money, noticed Emma posting less frequently about the boutique. Recent photos showed her looking stressed. Then, Rick posted, announcing a leave of absence for personal reasons from Morrison and Associates. This was peculiar as we hadn't filed our lawsuit yet, and the company was unaware of our deep investigation. Ashley drove by the boutique. It was closed during normal business hours, a handwritten sign stating, "Closed for inventory." Peering through the windows, Ashley saw many clothing racks were empty. It looked like they were either relocating merchandise or folding the business entirely. That evening, Ashley parked across the street and watched the store. Around 8:00 p.m., Emma and Rick emerged, carrying boxes, loading them into Rick's truck. They made several trips, removing what appeared to be remaining inventory and store fixtures. Ashley followed them to Rick's apartment complex. Emma's car was parked there with a moving truck beside it. It was clear they were planning to flee town with whatever money they had left. Ashley called me immediately, and I contacted my lawyer. If Rick and Emma were planning to abscond, we needed to act fast to freeze their assets and file criminal charges before they vanished. The lawyer contacted the prosecutor's office that night, providing all our compiled evidence. The prosecutor concurred. We had ample evidence for fraud and theft charges. Early the next morning, police executed search warrants on Rick's apartment, Emma's boutique, and the storage unit where they'd moved the remaining inventory. Rick was arrested at his apartment. Emma was apprehended at the storage unit, still loading boxes into a rental truck. Authorities discovered evidence of their plan to relocate to another state and start anew with false identities. Rick had already given notice at his apartment, and Emma had closed the boutique's business bank account. Most shocking of all, they found documents revealing Emma and Rick had been meticulously planning this scheme for over a year. They had identified my parents as targets due to their retirement savings and systematically engineered my destruction to clear the path for their fraud. Emma had kept detailed notes on my parents' finances, work schedules, and personal relationships. Rick had saved copies of the fake documents he'd created to support various aspects of their elaborate deception. Police recovered approximately $12,000 in cash and some unsold merchandise, but the majority of my parents' money was gone. Emma and Rick had squandered it on personal expenses, travel, and their futile attempt to abscond. Both Rick and Emma were charged with multiple felonies, including fraud, theft, conspiracy, and identity theft. Their bail was set prohibitively high, neither could afford to post it. Morrison and Associates immediately terminated Rick, issuing a public statement disassociating themselves from his actions. They also offered to settle my wrongful termination case to avoid further negative publicity. The settlement was substantial enough to cover my legal fees and provide considerable compensation for the damage to my career and reputation. More importantly, Morrison and Associates agreed to issue a public statement clearing my name and acknowledging that the allegations against me were false. My parents called me for the first time in months after Rick and Emma's arrest. Dad could barely speak, choked with tears. He repeatedly apologized, saying he should have trusted me. I told him I wasn't ready for a long conversation, but I appreciated his call. I said we'd need time to work through everything, but I was relieved the truth had finally emerged. Mom got on the phone, vowing to spend the rest of her life making up for not believing me. She understood if I never wanted to speak to them again, but hoped someday I could forgive them. I told her I needed space to process everything and focus on rebuilding my career. I clarified I wasn't cutting them off permanently, but I required time before a genuine conversation about moving forward could happen. That's the current situation. Rick and Emma are in jail, awaiting trial. My parents lost their retirement savings but finally learned the truth. My name has been professionally cleared and I'm starting to get interviews again. It's not a happy ending. The damage to my family relationships and my parents' finances is irreversible. But at least the truth is out and the architects of my destruction are facing consequences. The trial is set for early next year. I'll testify as a victim witness, alongside my parents and the manipulated co-workers. Hopefully, Rick and Emma will receive prison sentences commensurate with the severity of their multi-victim crimes. I never imagined being involved in a criminal case, but here we are. Sometimes, justice demands a full-blown fight, trusting that truth will ultimately prevail. Final update. I wanted to provide one final update, as so many of you have followed this journey and inquired about the trial. Rick and Emma both opted to plead guilty to multiple fraud charges, avoiding a trial. Rick received 3 years in state prison plus restitution. Emma received 2 years plus restitution. Neither will be eligible for parole for at least 18 months. The restitution order covers my parents' stolen retirement money, but realistically, we don't anticipate recovering much. Rick and Emma squandered most of the funds and possess minimal assets to seize. My wrongful termination settlement with Morrison and Associates was finalized. The amount was substantial, covering all my legal expenses and compensating me for lost wages and reputational damage. Crucially, Morrison and Associates issued a public statement unequivocally acknowledging that all allegations against me were false and that my termination was based on fabricated evidence. This public vindication dramatically shifted my job search. Several companies that had previously rejected me reached out to apologize and reconsider my applications. I accepted a position with a larger firm, offering superior pay and benefits than my previous job. The new company's HR director, Michelle, 52, shared during my hiring process that my situation had become widely known in the industry as a cautionary tale of how false allegations can ruin careers. She stated my willingness to fight back and prove my innocence actually made me a more attractive candidate because it showed character and perseverance. My relationship with my parents has been far more complex to rebuild. Dad sold his truck and Mom took a part-time job to help recoup some of their lost retirement savings. They both visibly aged during this ordeal, the stress and guilt evident whenever we spoke. Ashley skillfully facilitated several family meetings where we openly discussed what transpired and how to move forward. These conversations were arduous, with my parents repeatedly apologizing and asking how to make things right. I told them repeatedly I didn't want ceaseless apologies. What I desired was an acknowledgement that they had chosen to believe strangers over their own son, denying me any chance to defend myself. I wanted them to grasp that their lack of trust had been as devastating as Rick and Emma's lies. Dad struggled with this more than Mom. He continually asserted he was merely trying to protect the family's reputation and believed he was doing the right thing based on the evidence he saw. He found it difficult to accept that he should have questioned that evidence or at least listened to my perspective. Mom was more ready to admit her error in completely cutting me off. She conceded she'd let emotions override her judgment and should have known I would never behave as Emma described. We agreed to gradually reconstruct our relationship. I started having dinner with them once a month, slowly increasing contact, as trust cautiously reemerged. It's not the same relationship we had before, and it likely never will be, but we are making discernible progress. The hardest truth to accept is that my parents were both victims and, inadvertently, perpetrators in this saga. Rick and Emma deliberately targeted them for their retirement savings, but my parents also chose to believe egregious lies about me without proper investigation. Ashley has been an unwavering pillar of support throughout this entire process. She took vacation time to assist with the investigation and even testified at Rick and Emma's sentencing hearing. She also helped our parents comprehend the intricate financial and legal ramifications of what had befallen them. Ashley confessed she felt guilty for initially doubting my story. Witnessing the methodical planning of Rick and Emma's fraud made her realize just how compelling their deception must have been. I assured Ashley that her willingness to investigate and help expose the truth was paramount. Without her support and business acumen, we might never have unearthed the fabricated documents and financial fraud that ultimately brought Rick and Emma down. There were a few unexpected aftermaths following the criminal case. Patricia, the co-worker Rick had manipulated into signing the false complaint, filed her own lawsuit against Morrison and Associates for allowing Rick to foster a hostile work environment. Patricia's case revealed Rick had a history of inappropriate behavior that the company had knowingly ignored. 2 other female employees came forward with accounts of Rick pressuring them to make statements about male co-workers he wished to target. Morrison and Associates ultimately settled Patricia's case and implemented stringent new policies for investigating and documenting harassment complaints. They also hired an outside firm to review all terminations Rick had overseen in the past 2 years. This review unearthed 2 more instances where Rick appeared to have manipulated evidence against employees he wanted removed. Both former employees were offered settlements and public vindication akin to mine. It became evident Rick had been running his own personal vendetta operation within the company, targeting anyone he perceived as a threat or impediment to his advancement. I was simply the victim of his most elaborate scheme because he desired Emma and viewed me as the obstacle. The industry buzz about Rick's behavior ironically bolstered my reputation rather than harming it. People began viewing me as the individual who exposed a dangerous predator rather than someone accused of harassment. Several female colleagues from Morrison and Associates reached out, apologizing for their avoidance after my termination. They confessed they had been terrified because Rick had told them I was unstable and potentially dangerous. One woman, Lisa, 35, revealed Rick had explicitly warned her not to be alone with me, suggesting I might retaliate against female co-workers who had complained. Lisa now understood Rick was intentionally isolating me from potential allies. These conversations helped me grasp the full extent to which Rick had poisoned the workplace against me. It wasn't merely the formal complaints. He had been actively spreading rumors and cultivating an atmosphere of fear that made it impossible for anyone to support me or question the allegations. The most gratifying moment arrived approximately 6 months after Rick and Emma's sentencing. I was having lunch downtown when I spotted Emma's former business partner from the boutique, Sandra, 41. Sandra approached my table, apologizing for how things transpired. She revealed she had invested $5,000 in the boutique based on Emma's business plan and lost everything when the store closed. Sandra recounted Emma convincing her that I was an abusive husband who had been stealing money from the business account. Emma had claimed she needed to close the store hastily because I was threatening to sabotage it. Sandra now realized Emma had lied about everything, using the threat of my alleged harassment to pressure Sandra into rushed decisions without proper investigation. Sandra inquired if there was any way to recover her investment. I informed her about the restitution order but explained Rick and Emma possessed minimal assets to seize. Sandra mentioned considering a separate civil lawsuit but was unsure if the legal costs would be justified. I gave Sandra my lawyer's contact information should she wish to explore her options. I told her that pursuing justice had been immensely worthwhile for me, despite minimal financial recovery because it cleared my name and exposed the truth. My conversation with Sandra underscored that Rick and Emma had harmed more than just my parents and me. They had defrauded other investors, manipulated co-workers, and tarnished the reputation of legitimate businesses in our community. Reflecting on everything, I believe the most crucial lesson was the imperative of fighting back against false accusations, rather than hoping they'd simply vanish. When I was first fired, my instinct was to accept it and move on quietly, fearing that fighting back would only amplify the allegations and worsen my situation. But silence would have allowed Rick and Emma to escape their fraud, leaving me permanently branded as a harasser. Fighting back was the sole path to unearthing the truth and reclaiming my reputation. The legal process was costly, agonizing, and protracted, but it was invaluable for proving my innocence and holding Rick and Emma accountable. I also learned the critical importance of meticulous documentation and constructing a robust evidentiary case, rather than simply relying on people to believe my word against theirs. Ashley's business expertise was indispensable in exposing the financial fraud, and the statements from former co-workers were vital in proving the harassment allegations were fabricated. Without that concrete evidence, convincing anyone of such an elaborate conspiracy would have been exceedingly difficult. My career has rebounded beyond my expectations. My new job pays about 20% more, and I work with colleagues who know the full story and respect how I navigated the ordeal. My reputation in the industry is, remarkably, stronger now than before Rick and Emma's scheme. People view me as someone who stood up for himself and exposed corruption, not as someone accused of harassment. The relationship with my parents remains a work in progress. We maintain regular contact, but an underlying tension persists. They know they failed me when I needed them most, and I know they are capable of abandoning me based on another's lies. We are all striving to move forward. But trust requires painstaking reconstruction. Ashley has been instrumental in facilitating family discussions, keeping everyone focused on practical steps rather than emotional disputes. I've also cautiously re-entered the dating scene. Initially, I worried about explaining Emma and the false allegations. But I found that being upfront about my past actually fostered stronger connections. Women I dated appreciated my honesty and that I fought to clear my name instead of quietly accepting false accusations. I'm currently in a supportive relationship with someone who knew my story before we started dating and championed my pursuit of justice against Rick and Emma. That kind of support makes all the difference in moving forward. Rick and Emma are both imprisoned and will be for at least another year. I rarely think about them, except when I receive minimal updates on restitution payments. The essential takeaway is that truth prevailed, and they faced consequences for their actions. My life has moved forward and improved, while theirs has been shattered by their own choices. I wanted to share this final update because I know many were invested in seeing the outcome. The justice system worked, truth triumphed, and life continues. For anyone dealing with false accusations or workplace fraud, my advice is resolute. Document everything, build an ironclad evidentiary case, and never be afraid to fight back when you know you are right. It's not easy, but sometimes it's the only way to achieve justice and reclaim your life. Story 2. My father-in-law abandoned my daughter at the mall and tried to get rid of her. My husband didn't believe my daughter and defended him. I, 34, a woman, have been married to my husband Ryan, 31, for 5 years now. We have a beautiful daughter, Haley, 6, from my previous marriage. My life hasn't always been easy, but I've consistently strived to make the best of every situation. I grew up in a small town, raised by a single mom who tirelessly worked, 2 jobs to put food on the table. I learned early the value of hard work and perseverance, traits that served me well when I became a young mother myself. I met my first husband, Brian, 35, during college. He was studying engineering. I pursued elementary education. We fell deeply in love, marrying immediately after graduation. Brian secured a job at a local engineering firm, and I began teaching at a nearby elementary school. We were young, in love, and life seemed picture perfect. When I discovered I was pregnant with Haley, we were overjoyed. Brian was ecstatic to be a father, spending hours talking to my belly, meticulously planning for our future family. Haley was born healthy and beautiful, and for 2 glorious years, our small family was everything I'd ever dreamed of. But fate had other plans. Brian was driving home from work one rainy night when another driver lost control and crashed into him. He died instantly. Just like that, my world shattered. I was a 28-year-old widow with a 2-year-old daughter, adrift and uncertain how to navigate forward. The first year after Brian's death blurred into a haze of grief and sheer survival. I buried myself in caring for Haley and my job, barely keeping my head above water. My mom moved in for a while to help, and gradually I began to breathe again. Approximately 2 years after Brian's death, I met Ryan. He was a new teacher at my school, fresh out of college and brimming with enthusiasm. Initially, I saw him only as a friendly colleague. He was younger than me, and I certainly wasn't looking for a relationship. But Ryan was patient and kind, always offering an encouraging word or a helping hand. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ryan became an indispensable part of our lives. He'd offer to watch Haley during parent-teacher conferences or bring dinner when he knew I'd had a particularly tough day. Haley adored him, always thrilled when Mr. Ryan came to visit. It took a long time to admit to myself that I was falling for Ryan. I wrestled with guilt, feeling as though I was betraying Brian's memory. But my mom sat me down one day and gently told me Brian would have wanted me to find happiness, to give Haley a loving family once more. With her encouragement, I finally allowed myself to open up to the possibility of love again. Ryan and I began dating, taking things slowly for Haley's sake. He was incredible with her, never attempting To replace Brian, but carving out his own unique and special place in her heart. After a year of dating, Ryan proposed, and I said yes. Our wedding was small and intimate, attended only by close family and friends. Haley, our flower girl, beamed with pride as she walked down the aisle. As I exchanged vows with Ryan, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since losing Brian. I knew we were embarking on a new chapter, and I was excited for what the future held. The initial years of our marriage were wonderful. Ryan legally adopted Haley, and she began calling him Dad. We settled into a comfortable routine, balancing our jobs, family time, and our relationship. We even started discussing having another child together. But one cloud perpetually overshadowed our otherwise happy life. Ryan's father, Gerald, 65. From our very first meeting, I sensed Gerald's disapproval of me and Haley. He was a successful businessman who harbored grand aspirations for his only son. In his eyes, Ryan was squandering his potential by marrying a widow with a child. Initially, Gerald's disapproval was subtle. He'd make veiled comments about Ryan playing house or express hope we weren't planning more children because Ryan was too young to be tied down. I tried to dismiss these comments, hoping that over time Gerald would witness Ryan's happiness and come around. But as the years passed, Gerald's behavior only worsened. He'd openly ignore Haley at family gatherings, refusing to acknowledge her when she tried to show him her drawings or share stories from school. He'd make pointed remarks about what a shame it was that Ryan wouldn't have children of his own. Each comment felt like a stab to my heart, yet Ryan always seemed oblivious to the pain his father inflicted. I attempted to discuss it with Ryan multiple times, but he consistently defended his father. "That's just how Dad is," he'd say, or, "He doesn't mean anything by it." I began to dread any family gathering where Gerald would be present, but I maintained a brave face for Ryan's sake. Things escalated last month when Ryan's sister, Amy, 28, invited us all on a family vacation to celebrate her engagement. The prospect of an entire week with Gerald filled me with dread, but Ryan was so thrilled about the trip. He spoke of it as a grand opportunity for everyone to bond, for Gerald to finally see what a wonderful family we were. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We arrived at the beach resort where Amy had rented a large vacation home. The first few days were tense, but manageable. Gerald mostly ignored me and Haley, which I preferred to his usual snide remarks. On the fourth day, we decided to visit a large shopping mall nearby. Haley was excited to buy souvenirs for her friends, and even I looked forward to some retail therapy. For a while, everything seemed fine. Gerald kept his distance, and Haley enjoyed browsing the shops. I stepped away to use the restroom, leaving Haley with Ryan and the rest of the family. When I returned, Haley was nowhere to be found. Panic immediately seized me. I began a frantic search, calling her name, asking everyone if they'd seen her. Ryan and Amy joined the search, but there was no sign of Haley. After what felt like hours, but was probably only about 20 minutes, we found Haley crying near the mall's information desk. A kind security guard had found her wandering alone and brought her there. I hugged her tightly, relief washing over me. When Haley had calmed enough to speak, she recounted something that sent a chill down my spine. She said Gerald had taken her hand, led her away from the group, and told her to wait on a bench because he was going to buy her a surprise. Then he just left her there and never came back. I was incandescent with rage. I confronted Gerald in front of the entire family, but he denied everything. He claimed Haley must have wandered off and was making up stories. To my utter shock and disappointment, Ryan seemed to believe his father over our daughter. We cut the vacation short and returned home immediately. Since then, relations between Ryan and me have been incredibly strained. He stubbornly insists that Haley must have misunderstood the situation and that his father would never do something like that. I've tried explaining Gerald's consistent mistreatment of us, but Ryan refuses to listen. I'm at my wit's end. I no longer feel safe having Gerald around Haley, yet Ryan believes I'm overreacting. He's even suggested a family dinner to clear the air. I absolutely refuse to put Haley through that situation again. I love Ryan, but I'm beginning to question if our marriage can withstand this. Am I overreacting? Should I give Gerald another chance for the sake of peace? Or should I stand my ground and protect my daughter, even if it potentially means the end of my marriage? Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post, and I wanted to provide an update. First, a huge thank you for all your supportive comments and invaluable advice. They truly helped me gain perspective and find the courage to stand up for myself and Haley. After reading your comments, I realized a serious conversation with Ryan was non-negotiable. I spent a few days collecting my thoughts, preparing exactly what I wanted to say, determined to express myself clearly without succumbing to emotion. Last Friday, after Haley was tucked into bed, I asked Ryan if we could talk. We sat in the living room, the same space where we'd shared countless happy evenings as a family. I took a deep breath and began from the very beginning. I recounted every small incident involving Gerald over the years, things I'd dismissed at the time, but which had accumulated into a significant burden. I reminded him of the Christmas Gerald had inexplicably forgotten Haley's present, despite lavishing expensive gifts on his other grandchildren. I brought up the family barbecue where Gerald had loudly inquired when Ryan would have real children of his own. As I spoke, I watched Ryan's expression shift. Initially defensive, confusion then dawned in his eyes, followed by a stark realization. When I reached the mall incident, Ryan tried to interject, but I asked him to let me finish. I explained the profound hurt and betrayal I felt by his reaction to the mall incident. I articulated that by choosing to believe Gerald over Haley, he was inadvertently telling our daughter that her feelings and experiences were unimportant. I shared the nightmares Haley had been suffering, her newfound fear of malls, and her heartbreaking question: does Grandpa Gerald hate me? When I finished, Ryan remained silent for a long moment. Then, to my astonishment, he broke down and apologized. He admitted he'd been in denial about his father's behavior, unable to fathom his dad as a bad person. He confessed he'd noticed some of Gerald's hurtful comments before, but had convinced himself they were just harmless jokes. Ryan then opened up about his childhood, something he'd rarely discussed. He described Gerald as a stern, demanding father, constantly pushing Ryan to excel, leading Ryan to spend his entire life seeking his father's approval, a craving that persisted even into adulthood. But, Ryan added, hearing everything laid out so plainly had finally opened his eyes. He realized that in his desperate attempt to please his father, he had been failing as a husband and as a father himself. He promised to fully support me and Haley moving forward and to establish clear, firm boundaries with Gerald. The next day, Ryan called his father. He put the call on speakerphone, a gesture I deeply appreciated. Ryan told Gerald that unless he sincerely apologized to me and Haley and demonstrated a genuine change in his behavior, we would cease all contact. Gerald's reaction was even worse than I anticipated. He erupted, yelling at Ryan, accusing me of turning his son against him and branding Haley a liar. He invoked Ryan's childhood, claiming he'd sacrificed everything to give Ryan a good life, and this was his repayment. He even threatened to disinherit Ryan if he didn't come to his senses. Throughout the tirade, Ryan held his ground. His voice wavered a few times, but he did not back down. He declared that his family, me and Haley, now came first, and if Gerald couldn't respect that, then he would no longer be a part of our lives. After the call, Ryan was visibly shaken. He confessed he'd never heard his father speak like that before, and it had truly exposed Gerald's true character when he thought he could get away with it. Ryan apologized again for not believing me and Haley sooner. We decided to begin family therapy to help us navigate this complex situation, especially for Haley's sake. She's been experiencing nightmares related to the mall incident, and I'm committed to ensuring she receives all the support needed to process what happened. As for Gerald, he's been barraging Ryan's phone with angry messages and has even attempted to involve Amy and other family members. Thankfully, Amy is firmly on our side. She called us the day after Ryan's confrontation with Gerald and confessed she, too, had noticed Gerald's problematic behavior, but like Ryan, had made excuses for it. She fully supports our decision to distance ourselves from Gerald. Ryan's mother, Linda, 63, has been surprisingly silent through all of this. Ryan attempted to call her a few times, but she hasn't returned his calls. We're uncertain if she's siding with Gerald or simply trying to avoid involvement. Right now, we're taking things one day at a time. Ryan is grappling with his feelings about his father, but he's unwavering in his commitment to prioritize our family. He's been making an extraordinary effort with Haley, dedicating extra time to her, reassuring her of her love, and reiterating that what happened was not her fault. I'm cautiously optimistic about our future, but I know the road ahead is long. The hurt and mistrust won't vanish overnight, but I'm immensely proud of Ryan for finally standing up to his father and choosing to protect our family. Our first family therapy session is scheduled for next week. I'm nervous, but I hope it will help us all process what occurred and move forward as a stronger family unit. I'll keep you all updated on our progress. Thank you again for all your support and advice. It has truly made a difference in navigating this challenging situation. It's been about a month since my last update, and much has transpired. I want to extend my gratitude once more to everyone for your unwavering support and invaluable advice. It's been essential during this trying time. Our family therapy sessions are progressing well. We've completed 4 sessions so far, and while they are emotionally draining, I can clearly see the positive impact. Haley is gradually beginning to express her feelings about the mall incident and Gerald's behavior generally. It breaks my heart to hear the extent to which his actions affected her, but I'm relieved she's receiving the professional help needed to process everything. In our most recent session, Haley drew a picture of our family. She depicted Ryan significantly larger than Gerald, explaining that Ryan was her real grandpa because he loved her. It was a bittersweet moment. I was happy she felt secure in Ryan's love, but saddened that she had to endure such an experience at all. Ryan has also been attending individual therapy sessions, which I believe has been tremendously beneficial for him. He's actively working through his complex feelings about his father, coming to terms with the fact that Gerald isn't the man Ryan always believed him to be. Ryan shared that he started to recall suppressed childhood incidents where Gerald was excessively harsh or manipulative. It's been challenging for Ryan to reconcile these memories with the idealized image he'd constructed of his father, but I can see he's making significant progress. As for Gerald, matters have escalated. Approximately 2 weeks ago, he showed up at our house unannounced. Ryan and I were at work, and Haley was at school, but our vigilant neighbor witnessed him attempting to peer through our windows and immediately called us. We promptly contacted the police, who arrived and escorted Gerald off our property. This incident deeply rattled all of us, especially Ryan. He finally witnessed firsthand the lengths his father was willing to go. Following this, we decided to file for a restraining order against Gerald. The process has been stressful, but we firmly believe it's necessary to protect our family. Gerald did not take the news of the restraining order well. He's been actively spreading malicious lies about me to anyone who will listen, claiming I'm manipulating Ryan and turning Haley against him. He even went as far as to contact the school where Ryan and I work, attempting to cause problems for us there. Thankfully, our principal is fully aware of the situation and has been incredibly supportive. Most of the family sees through Gerald's deceit. But unfortunately, Ryan's mother, Linda, has unequivocally sided with Gerald. She's been relentlessly calling Ryan, attempting to guilt him into reconciling with his father. She's invoked Ryan's childhood, recounting all the sacrifices they made for him and how he's breaking the family apart. It's been difficult for Ryan to endure, but he has remained steadfast in his decision to protect our family. Ryan told Linda that unless she could respect our decisions and boundaries, we would have no choice but to limit contact with her as well. She did not respond well to this, and has since ceased calling altogether. I can see that this estrangement from his parents is taking a toll on Ryan, but he assures me he doesn't regret his decision. We've had to implement some changes in our daily lives. We've installed security cameras around our house and altered our routines to be less predictable. It's disheartening that we must take such measures, but Haley's safety is our paramount concern. We've also had comprehensive discussions with Haley's school, ensuring they understand she is not to be released to anyone but us under any circumstances. On a positive note, this entire ordeal has brought Ryan and me closer than ever. We're communicating better, and I feel our relationship is stronger for having navigated this together. Ryan has been an incredible father to Haley, going above and beyond to make her feel safe and profoundly loved. He's taken time off work to be present for Haley's therapy sessions and has been actively helping her overcome her fears. We're approaching each day with caution, but I feel cautiously optimistic about our future. The road ahead won't be easy, but I know we can face it together as a united family. We're concentrating on creating new, positive memories to help overshadow the negative experiences with Gerald. Last weekend, we took Haley to the zoo, her favorite place, and it was truly wonderful to see her laughing and enjoying herself, without any lingering shadows of fear. I'll update again if there are any significant developments. For now, we're simply trying to move forward and heal as a family. Thank you all again for your consistent support throughout this journey. Update 3. It's been approximately 2 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some recent developments in our situation. The restraining order against Gerald was successfully granted, which has provided us with a much-needed sense of peace. However, he's found cunning ways to circumvent it. He's been sending messages through other unsuspecting family members and even attempted to contact Haley's school on one occasion, though thankfully, the school was fully aware of the order and prevented any contact. Ryan's relationship with his mother Linda has deteriorated even further. She has unequivocally sided with Gerald and has been relentless in her attempts to pressure Ryan into reconciling with his father. Last week, she crossed an unforgivable line by telling Ryan that Haley wasn't his real daughter anyway, so he shouldn't be ruining his relationship with his real family over her. Ryan was utterly devastated by her cruel words and has since decided to cut contact with her as well, at least for the foreseeable future. This decision has been incredibly difficult for Ryan. He's been wrestling with immense guilt and second-guessing himself. There are days when he's quiet and withdrawn, and I know his thoughts are consumed by his estranged parents, but he's been discussing these complex feelings in his therapy sessions, which seems to be providing him with some solace. On a brighter note, Haley has been making remarkable progress in therapy. She's experiencing fewer nightmares and is gradually regaining her confidence. Her therapist suggested we establish a dedicated safe space for Haley at home, so we've created a cozy corner in her room with soft pillows, her favorite stuffed animals, and a comforting nightlight. Haley affectionately calls it her brave spot and retreats there whenever she feels scared or overwhelmed. Ryan and I have been making a very conscious effort to create positive family memories to help overshadow the negative experiences with Gerald. We recently took a short family trip to a nearby lakeside resort. It was just the 3 of us, and it was precisely what we needed. We went hiking, enjoyed picnics by the lake, and spent evenings engrossed in board games. Witnessing Haley laugh and play without fear, and observing Ryan fully embrace his role as her dad without any lingering shadows of doubt, made me feel profoundly that we're on the right path. As for our extended family, most have been supportive, but there are still a few who believe we're being overly harsh on Gerald. Ryan's sister, Amy, has been our most steadfast ally, consistently shutting down any attempts by others to minimize Gerald's egregious actions. She's been an incredible source of support for Ryan, frequently calling to check in on him and reassuring him that he's making the right decisions. We've also found unexpected support within our community. When word spread about what happened, in small towns, you know how quickly news travels, many of our neighbors and colleagues rallied around us. They've been keeping a watchful eye out for any suspicious activity around our house and have been incredibly kind and empathetic towards Haley. It served as a powerful reminder of the inherent goodness in people and has helped restore some of my faith in humanity after this whole ordeal. We're still navigating things one day at a time, but I genuinely feel like we're finally beginning to heal as a family. Ryan and I are stronger than ever, and Haley is thriving despite everything she's been through. While I wish none of this had ever occurred, I'm immensely proud of how we've come together to face these challenges head-on. There are still tough days, of course. Days when Haley is extra clingy or when Ryan gets lost in thoughts about his estranged parents. But we're learning to navigate these moments together, to communicate openly about our feelings and fears. Looking ahead, we're cautiously optimistic. We plan to continue with family therapy for the foreseeable future, as it's been incredibly beneficial for all of us. Ryan and I are also seriously discussing the possibility of moving to a new house in a different neighborhood, simply to have a fresh start away from the lingering memories of Gerald's unwanted visits. I'll provide another update if any significant developments occur, but for now, we're focusing on moving forward and building a happy, safe life for our family.